gun cotton, you have your sometimes they add nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin is a little bit different. That's actually a high explosive, but we'll get to that later. Sometimes they put the nitroglycerin in there, and this is called a double base powder. When it's black powder or smokeless powder together with nitroglycerin. If it doesn't have nitroglycerin in it, it's called the single base powder. This is more safer and more powerful than gunpowder, and it's used as a low explosive. Not in a gun, usually, if you put the nitroglycerin in there. Of course, the black powder, the gunpowder, certainly is used in bullets and in guns. Often they're used to propel fireworks. Well, bullets also, as we've seen from gunpowder. They also are put into strings. They're like, dissolved and solidified in strings because they burn very well. So, and they use as fuses. This thing doesn't get put out that easily. You start the fuse in one place. The gunpowder, let's say, in the fuse would make sure that fuse keeps burning and burning and burning until it gets to the main charge where the whole thing explodes. We don't just use potassium nitrate or even sodium nitrate. We don't just use nitrate. That's not the only oxidizing agent that's used for low explosives. We can use KClO4. That's potassium chlorate. Again, notice all those oxygens in there. Those are oxygens that are ready to react pretty quickly. That's what makes it an oxidizing agent. So you need fuel and sometimes potassium chlorate. The fuel is sometimes sugar. It's unfortunately popular as a homemade explosive to put in sections of pipe, using to make pipe bombs. Sugar, of course, is easily obtained. This also is relatively easily obtained if you know where to get it. And sometimes the fuel is not just the sugar. They put metals. Metals also oxidize. They also be used as fuels, but this is mostly for fireworks. Different colors, like magnesium produces a bright white light when it's oxidized, and it's made into fireworks. I mean, that's relatively harmless, but they could also just make it into a pipe bomb. These are set off often by adding sulfuric acid. You add sulfuric acid to this potassium chloride, you will produce something with a lot of heat. The reaction will be a lot of heat. This heat will set off the entire explosion with the chlorate together with the fuel. So remember, we did deal with an activation energy. When you have a reaction, you have the reactants, and you have some added activation energy, and it produces products. Here, the activation energy is provided by the sulfuric acid reacting with the chlorate. Then that is your activation energy. Once you got it, the chlorate will react with the fuel, the sugar, and maybe the metals. That will produce a lot of gas and therefore an explosion. There's also another way to make an explosion. We're not going to deal with this too much. If you fill a room with natural gas and set it off with a spark or a match, this causes an explosion. This is considered a low explosion. We have the oxygen in the air and the natural gas that fills the air also. You have to have the right amount. This is sometimes used as, it's used as a bomb. The idea is to fill a person's house with CH4 from their gas range in the kitchen. Then they attach, let's say, a sparking device to a door. So when they open the door, it sparks, ignites the entire gas, everything blows up. It's a deadly bomb, but it's, again, not that typical, but it's a deadly bomb that people use or have used. The thing is, you can't use too much of this of the CH4, the natural gas from the gas range. You can't use too much of it. If too much of it fills the air, it won't ignite because you need to have oxygen and this natural gas in the air. If you have too much of the CH4, let's say more than 13.9%, there won't be enough oxygen in the air. If it's less than 5.3, you won't have enough of this fuel of the CH4 in the air. So it won't ignite. You have to have it in between these percentages. The curious thing that happens afterwards, after the thing blasts and the heat dies down, then air comes back in. It cools down and air rushes in. After the blast removes all the air. It blasts out all the air. Then it cools down, the air comes back in. Now, we still have the CH4 in the air. I mean, again, if you have it near the 13.9%, if Near 5.3, you don't have much of the natural gas in the air, but if you have 13.9, you still have some natural gas left in the air. So when this oxygen comes back in, and this will further ignite the rest of the CH4 that was there, and this is not going to cause an explosion, but it'll cause a fire over the whole house, and that fire, as it keeps burning, can damage even more than the blast. But you have to have close to 13.9% of the methane for that. Also, a final note about low explosive. They're called low explosive. That does not mean they're not deadly. They are deadly. They are as deadly as a high explosive bomb. You might need less of the, let's say, gunpowder there might be more of the gunpowder to be the equivalent of a high explosive bomb, but people have it. So they just put more of it. If something is a low explosive, that does not mean it is deadly. It is not deadly. It is just as deadly as a high explosive bomb. People need to put more of it in it, which is what they do, but it is just as deadly, does about the same damage as a high explosive bomb. Don't let the word low explosive lull you into some kind of security. It's just as dangerous. So then we go to high explosives. These are used in the military and sometimes demolitions. People want to blow up, let's say, parts of mountains in order to get a road through. And of course, used by terrorists who are not an official military, but they use it too. And we are well aware of that, unfortunately. These are usually two parts to it. The primary explosive and the secondary explosive. Secondary explosive, that's the real bomb. But what sets off the real bomb? We primary explosives do that. These are sensitive, unstable chemicals that are easily blasted. This is used to set off other explosives. I mean, we don't use these primary explosives. They're unstable. You can't have a whole can of them because in your treatment of it, it can blow up. So it'll blow up because it's sensitive. What we do is we keep these primary explosives, small amount of them, in a very safe container, and then we activate the container. We blast the container, or we send an electric charge to the container. This will set off this this unstable primary explosive, and when that's done, that will ignite the secondary explosive, that's what caused the main blast. The secondary explosive is more stable than the primary explosive. Now, we can remember the primer in bullets and shotgun shells. The hammer of the gun hits the primer in the back of the bullet. It's safe there in the back of the bullet if nothing hits it. But if the primer, once the hammer of the gun hits it in the right way, it'll blast the primer. That will ignite the gunpowder in the bullets and send them out the gun barrel. So we do have a primary explosive and a secondary explosive. We'll talk mostly about the secondary explosive because that's what causes the damage. One of them is dynamite. You're probably familiar with it. This is just nitroglycerin that's soaked into wood or paper pulp and put into those little tubes reddish tubes that you've probably seen. It's something that soaks into something else. It's nitroglycerin. That's the explosive. It's soaked into something which can be set off. Sometimes they put sodium nitrate. Remember, this is an oxidizer. That helps it burn better and make a better blast. And there are ratings, because it's sold. You can have 40% rating. That means 40% nitroglycerin. 60% rating has 60% nitroglycerin in it. And the nitroglycerin is the high explosive. It can be set off by a fire. It can be set off by a major percussion, like it can be using a hammer on it will also set it off. Interestingly enough, heat does not set it off as well as percussion or an electrical charge. It's mostly obsolete. We have better things out there, but back in the day, it was the